Welcome everyone, this is Zan with Repro Products. Today's video is a tutorial on how to create a shelf system Revit family. Now this one that I built here is based off of a picture that I found on Google Images. And I'll show you that picture really quick. And this is what it looks like. I thought it would be neat to build this because the way it's designed, it is nice wood, it's got a little bit of trim, it's inset into the wall, so it eats into the wall and it wraps around the corner and it eats into the other wall as well. So I thought it would be fun to try to make this, but also make it parametric. So let's see how that's done. Now typically when I do a Revit video tutorial on how to build families, I typically go from the ground up. And so I teach you from scratch and specify what family to work with and build the reference planes, the skeleton system, build the mass geometry, and then align and lock and all the basic rules. This time I thought I'd show you the other way around. I'm going to show you the finished product and show you the understanding of why it's built the way it's built. So you have a good understanding of it. That way when you build it, you know what you're looking for and where you're trying to head. So I'm in Revit 2018.2. This is called Shelf System in Wall Revit RVT. It's just a Revit project file and there's a wall here. And that wall is just called a bamboo wall. And it has a basic thickness and it's set to a foot. Okay. The family itself is right here. And so when I select it, I can click Edit Family if I want to. I can click Edit Type to get into the Type Properties window. I can make adjustments to the overall shelf height, the shelf spacing between the shelves, and the number of shelves as well. So for example, if I switch this to 5 shelves, then the design should change. And if it starts to adjust and make weird position movements like this, that means you need to double check the family as to where the anchoring system is. Okay, so I'm going to undo this just for a second. And let's look at the family itself. So if I select it and click Edit Family, it'll take me into this particular family. Now, this family here, the way this is set up is, it's built upon an array of families. If I tab into this particular shelf, it is a family. If I click Edit Family, you can see that it'll open up this particular family. And if I switch the visual style to realistic, you can see what we're working with. So how is this family built? This family is built off of the initial Revit family template file called generic model wall based. And the reason I started with that is because I needed a host wall to draw the shelf in context with the wall. In addition to that, I needed to create void objects that cut into the shelf as well as cutting into the wall. If I look at the placement side of this family, we can zoom in here, we can see that it has a shelf length A, it has a shelf height, and it has thicknesses for the top and the bottom and the sides. And they're set to 1 inch and they're locked, so that way the thickness doesn't change. If I head over to the ref level and I select the actual text ref level, I can head over to the properties and go to the view range. And you may need to go here to adjust the cut plane so that it cuts the family that you're building. And that way you can see it a little easier. And again, if I switch this to realistic, you can see the difference between the wall host object versus the family mass that I'm building and the geometry. Now, this particular wall that they give you is a host wall. It's just a generic 12-inch wall. You can switch it to the different wall types, sizes, and thicknesses that you want, or you can make your own if you need to. Here you can see you have shelf length B as well, and you have the thickness for the depth and the shelf depth over here as well. And as well, you also have 1 inch, 1 inch, and 1 inch over here for the thicknesses. There is also, like I said earlier, a void object that is cutting into the shelf and is also cutting into the wall. And to get to that, you just need to put your mouse over and tab into it if you have to, or if you are lucky enough, it'll tell you what you have selected and left click it. And you can see that the void object is right there. I'm using the cut geometry tool to cut the void into the mass object of the shelf itself, which is nothing more than an extrusion. Okay, so if I click the extrusion and I click edit extrusion, it'll go back into sketch mode and you can see the sketch that I created. It's nothing more than an L shape right here. And so this edge is against that wall, this edge is against this wall, and it goes into the depth that I need. So if I look at it in plan view, it goes to here and to here, and all the edges are aligned and locked to the correct reference planes. And so once you use the cut geometry, it'll cut the void out of the furniture and also out of the wall. Once that family is finished being built, double check things, for example, making sure it's set to the correct category you want for scheduling purposes. And since this is a shelf that's nested inside an array within another family, if you need to tag the shelf itself, each individual one itself, you may want to put a check mark for shared right here. And once you've done that, you can save the file and save it where you need to save it. And then load it back into the family, not the project. Load it back into the family that has the array. Click OK. It'll go in and ask you if you want to override it. Now there are two override choices. The first one and then the second one. The second one difference is it says and its parameter values, meaning it will basically take any existing ones that you have in here that have individual different values and reset them back to the default. So I'm going to pick the second one. Okay. Now, now that that's finished, again, let me switch this over to realistic so you can see a little easier. One of the things that I did when I built this family is I set a overall shelf height up here because I may need the height of that shelf to be different than the height of the wall. And then I also set a 6-inch dimension here that's locked to let the software know that I want the shelf to start 6 inches below that point right there. Okay, and so that's your acting reference plane. So if you saw earlier in the beginning of the video how it kind of jumped up when we changed the number of shelves, it's because it's agreeing with this shelf height, not necessarily the wall. Okay, you could, if you need to, you can associate this level to the height of the wall, but I'm not worried too much about that. Now, again, like I said earlier, this is a family that's nested inside this family, and it is arrayed. And so how does the array function work, and why is this built the way it's built? If I select the entity, you'll see that it is part of an array. You know because the box that highlights is a dash box. And that means it's a group, which naturally most people would default to thinking it's part of an array. And because it is part of an array, you'll get the line work that connects all of the objects to the array, and it actually will be an integer number. And I have selected that integer number, and you can actually parameterize it, and I parameterized it by calling it the number of shelves. And I need to do that because the end user may want to change the quantity of shelves that he or she needs in the design. I also have the dimensional parameters for the spacing of the shelving so that they're equal on each one. And there's a shelf spacer because you might want to have more space between the shelves. If we zoom out a little bit, we can head over to the family types window and we can resize this if we need to. And what you're going to take a look at is you're going to see multiple parameters that I've created. You have the overall shelf height, 18 feet right here. And so let's do this for a second. This wall is set at 20 feet. So if I go back over here and I change this to 20, and I hit apply, everything should move up, which it does. Okay. Now remember, it's not dependent upon the height of that wall. Okay. I also have the shelf spacer as well, which is 4 inches. So if the client or the end user wants it to be a little bit more space, they can change that value and it will adjust. Now, the two critical ones are the shelf spacing and the number of shelves. The number of shelves is for the end user who wants to specify how many shelves are necessary. Say, for example, 5 or 6 or whatever value, as long as it fits within the height of the wall. The shelf spacing is a formula. And it's an interesting formula because we kind of have to think about it a little bit. It has to be based upon the overall height of the shelf height, the height of the overall height of the shelf, not the height of the wall. And you need to subtract all the spacing. And you need to subtract how many of them there are. So if we look at the formula, it is the overall shelf height minus the shelf spacing times the number of shelves minus 1. Because if we have a number of shelves is 5, then the spacer in between is 4. So that means we need the shelf space times 4. That's the size that we need inside to subtract from the overall shelf height. Then we can divide that by the number of shelves that the end user wants plus 1. And the reason we say plus 1 is because we need the additional gap on either end so that it looks nice in the design. So once you've designed all of this and set it up properly, part of the creation of the array as well, when you initially take this shelf and you array it, you need to make sure you align and lock the top reference of the object to the reference plane that it's associated to and the second one. If you don't do the second one, the Revit software will not understand that the rest of them are part of the array and it won't work properly. So once you have built it properly and you flex it, so again we go in here, we make changes, let's say we do 6. You can see that if I hit apply, things will change. See that? The shelf spacing will automatically adjust. The spacer is still at 6 inches. If I say do 2 inches, which I think is a little tight, we can still make it work. Okay. And if you look very carefully, yes, the shelf spacing and the spacer has changed, but the array, if you notice very carefully, it's not agreeing to aligning and locking. So somewhere along the lines, I did not align and lock the correct measurements so that it gives me the correct spacing. Okay, so I'll have to make that adjustment later. But for now, the principle and the understanding of the family is there. You can take that file, that shelf family, and you load it back into the family itself, and then the shelf system family is loaded into the project. So therefore, you can then take this design, and make the change that you want. Say, for example, I need this to be 4 shelves instead, and it will make the adjustment. Again, it's adjusting based upon the overall height of the shelf here, 18 feet, not the height of that wall. So if this was set to say 12, then it should drop down and the sizing should also adjust accordingly. And so that's how you build this shelf family, shelf system family in Revit. Thank you very much for watching.